story. There's a story about a shopkeeper. This shopkeeper was in a time and a place where he had to have a sign in his shop. It was the law. The sign above his door said that I love Big Brother and 2 + 2 = 5. Now, no, he didn't believe the sign, but he had to put it up. It was the law. And there came a time where he just realized, I can't live this lie anymore. He took the sign down. One of his neighbors reported him and dutifully received the money that the government offered for snitching on your neighbor. The man was arrested. He was vilified. He was ridiculed. Not because his friends and neighbors disagreed with him, but because they didn't want to be persecuted and prosecuted. But this man, what he did, he showed that this system that required him to put a sign, a lie, that he had to assent to, this system was only built on lies. And as soon as it was challenged, it started to fall apart. And I think many people don't want to admit that totalitarianism is possible in our society and in our time. Or otherwise they know, but they're comfortable in their position. They don't want to rock the boat. They want to be nice. They don't want to get into an argument. So they want to keep the peace to avoid conflict. Communism, they believe, ended it finally in 1989 in the Soviet Union and will never come back because we as an enlightened society will never repeat history again. The problem is, this new communism that is already here looks different than the communism of the Soviet Union or of Cuba or of China. That is why so many people are not recognizing the warning signs. Or they don't believe that one person can change the system. They want to jeopardize their comfortable life because in a lot of these communist and totalitarian regimes, the people who went along, they did just fine financially. I don't know about their soul, but financially they did fine. In 1974, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, when he was exiled from the Soviet Union, he exhorted the Russian people to live not by lies. Many men and women who have lived under communism can see that our society is moving towards this sort of totalitarianism. And I find it interesting when speaking to these people that have lived this reality, that are confounded how people here can't see it. And the elites and all these institutions, they're abandoning old-fashioned liberalism based on the rights, on defending the rights of the individual, and replacing it with a creed that regards justice in terms of groups. It encourages people to identify with a group, be a victim, whether it's ethnic, sexual, vaxxed, unvaxxed, and think of good as evil as the dynamics between those groups. Now, utopian vision, sure, drives these progressives in order to seek justice, rewrite history, and reinvent language to reflect their ideal of social justice. Now, these utopian progressives are constantly changing the standards of thought and behavior, so something you did last week might next week be illegal. Or they're going to cancel you, vilify you. And these consequences can be extreme. Now, under the guise of diversity, equity, and inclusion, the left creates powerful mechanisms for controlling the thought and discourse that marginalizes dissenters as racists, misogynists, etc. In the past, in pre-communist Russia, Marx was selling these ideas to the marginalized. They sounded like great ideas, right? Sure. Everyone will be equal, no matter how hard you work, no matter how much effort you put in. You will get the same amount. Sounds great. And you'll be liberated from the rich landowners and the capitalists. In our current times, this soft totalitarianism that is manifesting itself is a direct result of people being separated from each other, destroying the belief in the transcendent, making individuals reliant on government, and making government institutions bigger and bigger. One of the principles of the PPC is personal responsibility. The alternative is to abdicate your responsibility, and as we've seen over the last 3 years, there's some government official who will be more than glad to take responsibility for your life and make decisions for you. But it is not the job of government to tell you what you should be putting into your body, what you should be wearing, who should be in your home. It is the job of government to protect your rights so that you can continue making those decisions for yourself. Now, if we consider our current institutions, such as education and healthcare, we see systems that are collapsing under the weight of the absurdity. We have an education system that can't educate children anymore. It's more interested in indoctrinating children into a way of thinking. All of the workers in these institutions are grouped together for so-called negotiating purposes, but the reality is these unions want to control the thoughts and the way their members think. It's no longer just about negotiating. The field of medicine hasn't been infected with this same group think mentality. Our healthcare workers are told what to think by the College of Physicians and Surgeons or by their unions. There's a push towards these so-called group practices. And if healthcare workers dare to have a different opinion from the big pharma narrative, they will be punished, canceled, or censored. Totalitarianism has always required the citizens to assent to a set of beliefs or otherwise risk being shunned or persecuted or ridiculed. Today's totalitarianism, it demands an allegiance to a set of these progressive beliefs, many of which are incompatible with logic and certainly with Christianity, or any other traditional faith system for that matter. Compliance is forced less by the state and more so by neighbors, by friends, by corporations, by institutions that have control through technological means. And we know that to be true, and we don't want to admit it sometimes. In this post-Christian, post-national landscape, the ultimate dictator is able to make their citizens believe that 2 + 2 = 5, that a man can be a woman, that truth is not truth, that evil is good. History, and therefore truth, changes at the whim of the people controlling the narrative. The one who can manipulate history can manipulate truth. People who know who they are cannot be controlled, and we can never forget who we are. We can never forget our stories, where we came from, and what defines us as human beings. Oftentimes, people think of fascism as the opposite of communism, and these terms are especially unhelpful, especially in a time after World War II, when the German people were running out of the arms of the fascists into the arms of the communists. Any belief in these extreme philosophies will lead to a boomerang effect that can bring you back to another extreme, which is why human dignity, belief in the transcendent, belief in who you are and knowing what you stand for is what will keep us grounded and moving in the direction to get us out of this mess. Now, there is some good news for those who choose not to live by lies. You become empowered. We are here today so we can plan and work towards opposing the chains that these globalists have set out for us. The same enemy wants to separate us from the transcendent, from God. So we need to reconnect with a God that has created us in freedom and for freedom. A government that is becoming totalitarian does not know how to react to ridicule. So non-compliance is always the way forward. Every policy that empowers the individual and protects human dignity needs to be supported. Now we are in a battle, and our weapons are our ideas and our principles. At stake is our way of life, our culture, our will, our souls, and our freedom. The weapon of our enemies are lies, fear, and threats. And anyone who becomes afraid and too afraid becomes blinded by this fear. But when we choose to live with courage, we become free. And the kind of freedom that we all want is freedom from sin, freedom from weakness, and freedom from evil and fear. This is the freedom that is worth dying for. We have all been born with a purpose, and today, just being here, we are moving towards that purpose. We are heading towards it ever closer to the realization of why we are here. And it is to be free, and it is to make our own choices. Now, William Wallace, played by Mel Gibson in the movie Braveheart, he emboldened his fellow countrymen by the following words. He said, "I see an army of my fellow countrymen here before me in defiance of tyranny. And you come here as free men, and what do you do with that freedom? Will you run or will you fight?" And a man in the front answers, "We will run and we will live. Run and you will live, fight and you will die. But dying in your bed many years from now, would you be willing to give up every day from this day to that for the one chance, just the one chance, to tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they will never take our freedom?" Amen. Out of the depths of the darkest hours in history are forged the greatest heroes. Gandhi never allowed the British to infiltrate into the minds of India. Pope John Paul II never negotiated with the communists. The heroes of World War II never backed down in the face of the darkest tyranny, and the martyrs of history were not fools. I will never regret not being fearful enough. I may regret not standing up for the things I loved and cherished, but there is only one question that I need to be able to answer to myself. Will I be able to face my Creator on the day of judgment and say that I did everything I could to defend freedom, to defend justice, to defend the vulnerable, and to defend the natural and God's laws? The greatness of a person doesn't come from how much money they have or how much influence they yield or how much education they have. But I believe that the greatness of an individual comes from how much they are willing to sacrifice for another. Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you.